Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. Shakur Stevenson, his back is against the wall. And make sure you like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Leave that donation for that fried rice and chicken wings. Look, Shakur Stevenson must win. He's surrounded by crocodiles right now. There's a whole lot of people out here who want to see him lose. As a result of, the guys from that whole Crawford camp, Bomack camp, and those who are associated with him. Keyshawn Davis, as a result of how he acted and his antics, people are like, okay, he and Shakur Stevenson are supposed to be like brothers, but now we don't like Shakur Stevenson. We want Shakur Stevenson to lose the fight. But I'm telling you, I just think there's a lot of pressure on Shakur. There was already a lot of pressure on him before. Now, Keyshawn's situation sure as hell didn't help Shakur Stevenson. Anyway, Keyshawn losing his WBO title after missing weight. I mean, it doesn't directly affect Shakur, but I think it definitely can have some indirect effects. Shakur going into a fight with Williams Zepeda, he needs a clear mind. And I just have a feeling that knowing how close that him and Davis are, and how Davis has come out and publicly supported Shakur Stevenson, talking about he's going to go and knock out Zepeda, which I don't think many of us believe that anyway. A lot of people feel Shakur Stevenson can get the win, but get a knockout, that's something totally different. You know what I'm saying? I'll say this with Shakur Stevenson. He seems to be able to focus and not get too distracted. I do think he has his own issues to work through as far as worrying about proving to fans in the boxing community that he has power. But I know one thing, he's going to be focused on his own fight. And although Davis' situation, it's a bit of a distraction, especially the way everything happened with Keyshawn Davis in such a high-profile manner. I just think Shakur Stevenson is going to keep his composure, and if anything, one thing Shakur Stevenson is going to do, he's going to maintain his professionalism. I think what happened with Keyshawn this past weekend, I think that's a lesson learned for a lot of these fighters, especially the young guys who can find themselves in situations or around people where bad decisions are being made. And I can see them looking at those choices and saying, hey, let me get the hell out of here, because it's just not worth it. You know what I'm saying? Now, as far as Shakur Stevenson and what happened with Keyshawn Davis, the question is it going to create extra motivation, or is it just not going to impact Shakur Stevenson? I think it can give him some extra motivation, because he kind of says that's little bro, that's his little brother. So maybe he wants to come back and get a win for his little brother, although it's against a different opponent. So there probably will be some extra fuel there. But I'm going to tell you what, he going to need some JP8 fuel. That's jet fuel. Because Zepeda is no easy task. I've talked about it. Those of you who follow boxing knows that dude is just relentless, crazy volumes of punches, and he's not going back down. And that's where, Shakur Stevenson has got to lock in more than he's ever had to. And his skill and defense, that's going to give him the edge in some of the rounds, but it doesn't mean he's going to win the round. But when every round begins, Shakur Stevenson's going to have an edge because of his skill set and his defense. But as the round progresses and Zepeda pushes the pace hard and makes it ugly, I just think Stevenson is going to have to show us that he can dig deep, because Tevin Farmer had to dig deep, and it just wasn't enough. And I think Tevin Farmer had a little more backbone, a little more bravery. Not a diss to Shakur Stevenson, but Tevin Farmer was cool with staying in the pocket and exchanging and going into the eye of the storm to try to land shots. Shakur's going to have to do that. And in order to do that, you're going to have to dig deep and, bite on your gum shield and just say, you know what, I'm going in. Because if Shakur can't do that, I'm telling you, it's going to get ugly. But staying sharp and trying to outbox Zepeda is something that he could do. But the problem with Zepeda is that nonstop rhythm. And I personally think some of Shakur Stevenson's rhythm is already broken, just seeing what happened with Keyshawn, what happened with his brother lose it. What happened with the other brother, name being, inextricably connected to Keyshawn's and, the jump of Nahir Albright. But anyway, I just want to sit back and see how this goes because Team Bomack, I talked about it in the live this morning. Keyshawn lost. That's part of Team Bomack. Shakur Stevenson isn't directly attached to Bomack because he doesn't train him, but there's definitely a relationship there. So you could say Team Bomack will be, indirectly affected but still affected if Shakur loses. So they can't afford to have two losses. And then you got Crawford who's going to have to try to pick up the slack and get a win for the team. But Shakur is always laser focused. And I just think it could be a bit frustrating for him going into this next fight, especially knowing now that you got guys like me and others who are looking at him and saying, hey, he may end up like Keyshawn. Although Keyshawn didn't take a loss, he didn't get paid. We all know the story. But you look at Shakur, we know he's going to make weight. But the issue is he could end up in a negative space. So it's just a bunch of headaches that he shouldn't have to deal with, but it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? But I hope that Shakur Stevenson has the right people around him to make sure that he's not carrying any of that emotional energy that Keyshawn Davis and his brothers were carrying around during fight week out there in Norfolk, Virginia. Because that would definitely affect Shakur Stevenson's timing. It affects his decision-making. And he can't afford to have those kind of mistakes early in the fight where Zepeda and Shakur both are the most dangerous. You can't be in there, man, overthinking things. Everything that Shakur normally does is instinctive, and he needs to be on from the first second to the first round. The spidey senses need to be firing, because if not, that shit can spell trouble for Shakur Stevenson. I'm trying to picture Shakur Stevenson and Zepeda, and although adjustments need to be made by both fighters, someone's going to have to be a little quicker on the draw with making their adjustments. And Shakur Stevenson, let me tell you something. He normally makes adjustments pretty fast, but he's going to have to make, like split-second decisions, because he can't be slow to adjust to what the hell's going on inside that ring. If he's doing that, he can find himself in a much tougher fight than what he anticipated, and his fans are going to be sitting back saying to themselves, are you kidding me? Zepeda's overwhelming Shakur like he's done all of his other opponents. So if Shakur's not fully locked in early, look, he can get clipped. But we just have to wait and see, man. Now, one thing I do hope, and I'm just being real, Shakur only needs to hear one voice. In a fight with a guy like Zepeda, who's the biggest fight of Shakur Stevenson's career, he can't afford to have Bomack trying to give him instructions, Terrence Crawford in the crowd shouting stuff, Andre Ward in the crowd shouting stuff, and you sure as hell don't need Keyshawn Davis in the crowd shouting anything to Shakur Stevenson. I personally think they should ban Keyshawn from Shakur Stevenson's fight, because I just think he just brings nothing positive. Nothing at all. Like, he's not needed. I think they should ban him from coming to the fight. I just think that would be wild if Keyshawn was just ringside trying to shout advice and trying to hype up the action. You know what I'm saying? I think Shakur Stevenson can end up being completely thrown off. Some people may say maybe it can help him lock in, but I don't know. I think, Shakur Stevenson could look at him, and next thing you know, emotions get involved, especially if he had a little success. Keyshawn hype him up, and sometimes these young fighters don't always listen. Now he gets in the ring and does something he shouldn't because he's kind of, absorbed some of that emotional energy that Keyshawn's bringing, and now Shakur goes out there and gets his ass decimated. You know what I'm saying? But he can't afford to let anybody in that venue disrupt his usual calm, calculated approach. But one thing about his calm, calculated approach, everything about him needs to be faster than normal. And that's how he's going to slow down Zepeda. So Shakur needs to be fast in order to slow down Zepeda. If he can't be fast in his thinking and the physical aspect of the fight, then he's not going to slow down Zepeda. Because let me tell you, if Zepeda gets real early, especially if Keyshawn's getting vocal, Shakur could feel the need to try to respond aggressively. And that's going to work against him because for most fighters to respond aggressively, they tend to abandon their defense. And that would just be all bad, you know. But anyway, we'll see how the fight goes. I still think that Shakur Stevenson has bitten off more than he can chew. I do understand people favor Shakur Stevenson to win the fight. But I'm just telling you, man, when I look at the tempo, I look at the game plan, I look at the outside voices that are going to be there, I look at the distractions, I look at the energy that's going to be there. I'm just telling you, the chaos outside the ring would adversely affect Shakur Stevenson. Zepeda ain't worried about that shit going outside the ring. He don't even really speak English. He speaks some, but he just chooses not to. But Zepeda likes chaos in the ring. See the difference? Shakur is cool with chaos outside the ring, but he doesn't like chaos in the ring. Zepeda could care less about what's going on outside the ring, but he wants chaos in the ring because he thrives in chaos. And that's what he's going to try to create for Shakur Stevenson. But anyway, let's see how it plays out. If Shakur gets through it, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of pressure on Team Bomack, on Crawford, and Shakur. We know what happened with Keyshawn losing his title. Could you imagine if Shakur comes down, loses his, and then Crawford now, it's got to go into the biggest fight of his career against a guy like Canelo, and expect Crawford who jumped in 2 weight classes, to go in there with a clear mind and be able to put on a top-notch performance. I just don't think it happens. You know, if Shakur struggles or loses, it could shake up the confidence of the camp heading into Crawford's fight. That's just a fact. That's kind of how that goes. You know what I'm saying? But if Stevenson dominates, well then now we're on to something. You know, it can give Crawford and Bomack's team the boost they need. Because right now it seems like everybody's got low energy over there. You know what I'm saying? As a result of Keyshawn. But anyway, Crawford jumping up against Canelo is a size difference. We'll see how it goes. I kind of think Crawford's going to pull it off. But people think that, I'm not giving Canelo credit. You know, it's funny because I sit here and I just see boxers, right? I don't see color of skin. I don't care. Plus, culturally, I don't really, most of y'all wouldn't identify with me anyway, culturally, because just the way I grew up and the way I see things and my experiences. So I don't just look and see a person's skin color and welcome them or dismiss them. I deal more with attitude, mentality. Not many people who comment on these videos are like that. Especially with talking boxing, everything has to be about race. But it's funny because I'll sit here and say I think Crawford has a good chance of beating Canelo. And then you'll get most of the cats who are Canelo supporters who want to say it's because they see this brown skin of mine and think that I'm supporting Crawford because they're just looking at the color of the skin. But then you come out here and you say something about a guy like Davis, who was a dumbass, made a poor decision, and the it's the DB3 Stooges, and people think that, it's you're attacking your own. First of all, y'all need to come from underneath the rock and let go of this color talk when we're talking boxing. I will never talk down on a fighter because of their race. I'll never praise a fighter because of their race. I'm talking boxing. But one thing I'll say is, don't get it twisted now. I know how society can be. Remember, I'm 50 years old and did 25 years in a place that did a lot of great things for me. But I've seen a lot of things too, good and bad. And I know how it is when there's a numbers game, when you're talking about society. I'll put it to you this way, right? And you guys should take this and you can run with this. So they have a place out here that I take my sons, right? It's a family venue, but it's an all-inclusive venue that welcomes kids and people, all ages, with disabilities as well. So I'd say maybe you get like 30% of the patrons have some kind of disability. Their parents bring them, or they're adults, and they need a little bit of help, but they come to this place. You can fish there. They've got like 7 damn playgrounds. They got roller coasters. They got carousels. They got like 5 water parks. You pay $38 from May. It's a flat fee, $38 from May to November. One-time fee. And you go there as much as you want with your kids, and you can bring outside food and drinks. Now you may say, where are you going with all this? What's this got to do with the race and shit you were talking about? Check this out. So we were there fishing. So I take my sons there because it's really nice, man. And like I said, 70% of the people there don't even have disabilities. It's a place for all families, but they really have a focus on kids with disabilities, So we're there fishing, and check this shit out. 2 of the guys who are responsible for the dock, right? It's a huge dock, huge fish in there. So my sons and I go there and we catch all the fish. But the 2 guys who are responsible for the dock, they have disabilities, so they're a little bit, they function, but you could tell that there's a little bit more to them. Now, I hooked onto this catfish. Now my sons are 7, 10, 12, and 14, right? They'll all, will have a birthday this year. So I hooked onto this big-ass catfish, and I was telling my son, I said, yo, tell those guys to bring the net. Now, my 14-year-old's a bit of a hothead, right? He's like, yo, we need the net. And he's like, he says to me, he's like, what the fuck, man? I said, hey. I said, watch your language, man. I said, you got to understand these guys, the guys working have disabilities, so they're not going to respond to things like we do. He was like, yeah, all right. But my son's, he don't want to lose the fish. So finally the guy comes over, and he's walking with the net. Now I got like a 12-pound catfish on the line. I should show y'all pictures. A huge catfish. And he just walks over there. We're freaking out because we're like, if it was us, we would have been running, And he's just walking, taking his time. So he comes over there, and he's like, yeah, what do you need? Remember, he's got a little disability, so I'm trying not to laugh, but I'm trying not to get agitated either because the way he's talking to me. And he's like, well, what do you need? And I'm like, we need the net. And he looked over, he's like, yep, looks like somebody caught a big fish. I'm like, yes. I'm like, yo, get the fish, man, or can my son use the net? And this is what he tells me. He was like, sir, he's like, you shouldn't talk to the fishing wharf manager like that. I was like, oh my God, what is going on here? So finally we get the fish up, and I said, hey, because I'm like, I don't want to go through this no more, because, I don't want to have these exchanges with these guys because I understand the pace they move at, no issue, you know what I mean? Would never, ever want them to feel uncomfortable. So I asked the guy, I said, hey, because I'm like, next time I come here, I don't want to use their net. I was like, can I bring my own stuff here and fish? And he's like, yeah. He's like, anybody you can bring whatever you want. You don't have to use our stuff. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. He said, yeah, that's right, because you didn't talk to the fishing wharf manager. And he called the other guy over with disabilities. And the 2 handicapped guys, they were laughing at me. Now, they're laughing at me, and I'm sitting there like, yo, they're making me feel a kind of way, right? And the guy's like, yeah, this guy here wants to bring his own bait and tackle and his fishing poles. And they're laughing their asses off at me. And my son is sitting there. My 3 sons are rolling. And they're like, Dad, these guys are sitting here smoking you. And I'm like, yeah, well, this shit ain't gonna last forever. And I'm like, let me keep a cool head and not say nothing. I know these guys have whatever challenges. But the reason I give you that story is because I think it comes down to numbers. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to how a person can end up being treated. Because definitely I was in the minority there when it comes to the workers at that dock. And they were making me feel a kind of way. And I think that's what happens when it comes to society, where you'll have the numbers to the advantage of a certain group of people. And the majority will always, most of the times, can make, when they choose to, can make those in the minority feel a kind of way. And I think that's what tends to happen, like with these boxing communities that we're talking about boxing. Depending on the individual, if they're in the majority or minority, and they have enough people on their channel, you can see them kind of going at a fighter just because the person may be a little different to them. But anyway, man, I went way off on a tangent, but all I'll say is this. People learn to love all and hate none would be in a much better space, because that race shit does not matter when it comes to talking about boxing. We're talking about boxing. That's all we're talking about. So leave the race shit out of it. Because I got some shit, I could kick some knowledge to y'all, some shit that'll really have y'all scratching your heads, but that ain't what my channel's about. I keep it to boxing, right? Y'all keep cool, I'm in the breeze.